everybody, and welcome again to the Third Stage Astrology channel with Taina, Ketola, and Katya Slivinskaya. And we today are talking about the 3 stages of Sun in Sagittarius with an Aquarius North Node. And we're starting to do these by request. So this was requested by Alicia Steele. And what we're doing, if people know, or if they have their time of birth and they want us to find out for them what house their node is in, we're going to talk about that particular house position for the person that requested it when we get to that point. And so, but in general, first of all, if you're familiar with the nodes, the moon's north and south nodes are points that show up in people's charts. They are based on the movement of the moon as it crosses the ecliptic, which is the outer space equivalent of the equator. So every time the moon goes right to the very middle of the earth, going either in its north motion or its south motion, the moon has a very elliptical, complicated, wobbly orbit. Every time it crosses that midpoint, that ecliptic, either heading north or heading south, that's the moon's nodes. And everybody has a north node and a south node. It's where the moon would be in that position as it's heading south or as it's heading north. And the moon's north node has to do with our positive future spiritual direction, the traits, the area of life that expands us, that helps us grow, helps us move forward. And the south node has to do with our karmic history and with everything that we're letting go of and leaving behind. Sometimes there are gifts from the past that show up in the south node. And we want to bring those gifts forward, but let go of the things from the past. So the nodes work very well with the 3 stages of a sign, because in third stage astrology, everybody stays the same sign for a long series of lifetimes, goes through 3 stages with each sign, and each stage lasts for 3 or 4 lifetimes. So it represents the long-term path of development for the soul. And when you look at your moon's nodes, it will give you additional information about how you have handled and are handled this transformation of going through the stages with your sun sign. So it's one facet of chart integration in a way, because everything is in the chart is related to everything else, and everything in the chart is always related to the sun. We can always ask any question we have about why is this way. The answer is almost always found in this long-term progression through the stages with the sun. So first stage Sagittarius is a person. First of all, Sagittarius is about finding and expressing and sharing the truth about life, the truth about spirituality, the truth that will benefit the world and benefit people. It's the rarest sign of the zodiac by quite a margin. Much less people are born under that sign. All the others, they're about equal. But I always think it's because most at this level of development that we're at as a society right now, most people are not looking for truth. It's not a high priority. But Sagittarians are, they're looking for it and they're here to share it. And in first stage, there's not a really conscious understanding of being a truth seeker, but the person is born spontaneously aligned with divine truth, trusting in life, trusting in spirit. They instinctively know certain natural truths and certain the lovely message of the beauty of life innately. That's what first stage Sagittarius are like. So if we had a first stage Sagittarius with the north node in Aquarius and the south node in Leo, what might that potentially say about them? Even though we're not going to probably have a whole ton of them listening, as most people who listen are second, third, or third stage.
I'm sorry, you actually cut out there, Taina. So you said although what?
Although most of the people who would be watching right now are not likely to be in first stage of various signs. Most of our audience are going to be in the second, third, or third stage of their signs, but there will be some exceptions. Just because most people in first stage in their signs are just living their lives. They're not exploring. All right, now you froze up a bit. All I see is a frozen Katya. Hello? Yes, the question that I asked you is that it was just so riveting that it froze you up and it blasted your computer.
My computer broke and I had to get a new one, and this is a good one.
Right. So the question is, what would an Aquarius North Node and a Leo South Node be saying for a first stage Aquarius person? How would that point their focus?
Well, so Aquarius North Node to me always speaks of that positive spiritual direction of, being one, like one of the people
Yes. Yeah.
in that, yep. Rather than, you know, the Leo South Node, which is really like past lifetimes, usually of being on a pedestal of some kind, either being, a person of fame, well known somehow, or even like a ruler, some
Yes,
kind of,
it's
you
true.
know,
And it would be interesting if someone's in first stage, I think the moon would say a lot.
yes,
We look at the South Node in combination with the moon.
yes,
If the person coming from a sign that was a sign that was very responsible and it was very much, I've got to carry this or I've got to be the center of attention, it would be very hard for a first stage Sagittarius to try and be more lordly or dominant or be the center of attention because they're very good at trusting and just being, and they wouldn't be inclined to carry responsibility or to stand out and say, I'm really important. So their path of joy would be to just be in part of the community, for sure.
yeah,
And actually, as Sagittarius progresses and the person moves towards the crossroads where they could go into second stage, that south node could act like this heavy ballast that could pull them down into second stage. So when someone gets to the end of first stage Sagittarius, they've had lifetimes of just trusting and trusting, and life works out beautifully for them. But the problem is that they aren't able to share this with other people. So they lead a bit of a charmed life, but nobody else does. So, I always think about my first stage Sagittarius grandfather and how my grandmother used to criticize him and attack him all the time and complain about him all the time because no matter what was going on, he was always trusting and smiling. And yes, it did always turn out okay, but she felt alone in her suffering. And the first stage Sagittarius person feels badly about that too. They don't want people to be unhappy. They wish they could figure out some way to share their happiness with others. So this thought of, well, I'll find an answer and be the leader who will save them from their suffering could actually be almost like I see this big weight attached to somebody and it pulls them forward, but
yes,
down a hill, down that slippery
yes,
slope into second stage, where they
yes.
go looking for answers outside of themselves because they don't feel strong enough all in and of themselves. It's not about getting that inner answer. But to
So, yeah, I was just also, what came to me was that Leo South nodes tend to have a very good heart,
yes.
right? They're very heart-centered people. They're really well-meaning,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes. Yes.
And yet they don't really know how to be one of the crowd because they've always been on this pedestal.
Yes.
So in first stage of Sagittarius, I can even imagine this, kind of naive or innocent, you know,
Yeah.
trusting of the divine, and yet not really, first stage Sagittarius, the real problem is their relationship with the people,
Yes, it is. Exactly.
right?
Yes, it is.
Because it's really the others that don't get them, don't understand their relationship with life, their trusting relationship, and how they're managing to maintain that. And so it's really their relationship with the community
Yeah.
that is the Achilles heel.
It is, and yet, if it's going to be a positive relationship with the community, it can be that innate sense of joy and trust that Sagittarius has can get translated into a sense of trust in the tribe, in the joy of the community and the communal experience, and just spontaneously sharing.
Mm,
They could almost spontaneously share what they know instinctively without having to consciously logically describe the process to people because they don't know
yes,
it yet, but they could
yes,
spontaneously share it. So even as the south node acts like this ballast that could pull them into second, the north node could act as a real powerful opportunity to crossroad and go straight to third stage.
absolutely. And
Very
the
powerful to have this combination for a first stage Sagittarius, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I love that point about how it can actually, if they reach for that north node at the crossroads, it can really help, because Aquarius north node is also very much about trust,
Mm.
right? Trusting the moment,
Yep.
trusting that if you don't control, things will still be fine, that what's being given in the moment is actually the perfect thing. Like we don't need to always be the monarch that's, you know, it's going to be my way.
Yes, yes. And, you know, even if there's not anything in the soul history of a first stage Sagittarius that would incline them to think they would remember having been a monarch, it can even represent this idea that they are supposed to somehow be in control, that they are supposed to somehow lead, because Sagittarius's original soul urge is to find truth, to share it with the people.
Yes.
So that in itself is almost the, you know, the benevolent monarch in a way. There's an old soul urge that's coming from the benevolent monarch, that's coming from that loving heart. It assumes that they're supposed to lead everybody. But for a Sagittarian with the Aquarius North Node, possibly in any stage, but particularly in first stage, it's very much about sharing with the people. And the truth unfolds naturally. It reminds me of being you know, a little tiny piece of sourdough that you can put into the dough, and you know, the leaven that grows everything else, and you know, makes the next loaves of bread that we're going to bake.
Yes,
it just comes in. It comes into the mix naturally.
Yeah, I love that. It's like that. I always think of Aquarius as being, you know, rather than like a centralized network, being like a distributed network, like the internet, or like the cell, you know, the nervous system or the skin, right? It's like, it's distributed. There's no center. We're all equally important.
Yes, it's true.
So that
the internet came out very big when Uranus and Neptune were going through Aquarius. So it literally is, the internet literally is an expression of Aquarius, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so what happens with Sagittarians is, I sort of mentioned when I was talking about my grandfather, is that they trust and life once moves beautifully for them, but they can't share their joy with other people. They can't share their charmed life with other people. And that makes them feel sad. It can make them feel not very good about themselves. It's not great for the self-esteem, because I mean, I want to have some value to the others, not just to my own life. And what makes it difficult is that people get bugged by them. Why are you so happy all the time? What are you smiling about? And because they are over time being very affected by other people's negative response to them, they focus more on it, they draw it to themselves more. And by the time they get to the end of first stage, they're really negatively affected by critical people of all kinds. Many times it's a relationship partner. A romantic partner is pretty fundamental to the traumas in first stage. And by the time the person gets to first stage Sagittarius, it's like this natural trust in life is kind of crumbling quite a bit. And they feel so bad about themselves, they decide, I just want to go out and find something that will help everybody. Find something that will help other people stop suffering so much. And then I'll feel better about myself, because, you know, they feel like they feel a little bit like Forrest Gump. You know, he's a very good expression of a first stage Sagittarius. Doesn't really know a whole lot, but has this incredible innate wisdom that he just trusted.
And some people will even like think they're a little dumb, or like a little,
that's what I'm trying to say. They think they're dumb, even though they're not. They feel like they are. So they want to find that knowledge. They want to find that knowledge, or that system, or that way, or that means that will bring, will save the world. And so that's second stage. So now a second stage Sagittarius is out there kind of indoctrinating themselves with a spiritual philosophy, a political philosophy, coming up with their own philosophy of a potentially sort of extreme response to life. Some of them just really grab a hold of whatever are what they see as the basic principles of their current society, and trying to live those out in a very strong, heartfelt, maybe extreme. Some of them can be quite conservative because they're trying to follow the rules. If everyone follows the rules, everyone will be happy, is the idea of second stage Sagittarius.
Yes. Yeah.
So for them, if they've got that North Node in Aquarius and that South Node in Leo, they are going to be trying to teach people. They are often, I would say, a little bit extreme or not completely natural in how they're expressing themselves, because everything is being forced. It's trying to compensate for, I didn't know before, maybe I don't know enough now, maybe this really won't save people, but we're going to make certain it does because this idea is the one.
Yes.
And so the more they go into, it's got to be this way and everybody's got to follow me, the more, again, that ballast of that South Node in Leo, where they're trying to be the leader and tell everybody how we have to live, is just going to weigh them down even more, because it becomes, the South Node in Leo has that benevolent ruler and that heart-centered motivation. In second stage Sagittarius, it can start to become more dogmatic, more of a sense of fear involved in what they're doing, and so they have to really impress these ideas no matter what. And the more that they do that, the more they dig themselves a hole.
Yeah. And I just want to parse two pieces of this this tendency or this desire to get this truth and to disseminate it, which is the first, is really wanting to help the people, because right, because there's this memory from first stage of, why was I happy and everyone else wasn't?
Yes.
Right. I want them to have what I have, and yet I don't know how to explain it.
Yes.
And then the second piece, which is, ouch, my self-confidence, like nobody saw me.
Yes.
And how do I compensate for that? So both of those things are going on at the same time.
Totally true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this other element with this nodal combination, which is that the Achilles heel is doing it all on your own. And so that as soon as they're with other people, then there's a chance to smooth some of those rough edges off of those extremist philosophies, possibly. If you get some input from other people, and again, you're part of the community, but there certainly can be a very, very strong draw to any kind of spiritual communities or religious communities. And as a person, see, part of second stage Sagittarius is gaining knowledge that you're going to use in third stage. And the person goes through several lifetimes where they're going to involve themselves in different philosophies and different talents and different techniques. And so if they are earlier in second stage, before it's really falling apart, it can really feel like a tremendous, my home has called me. This is my spiritual home. This particular spiritual community that I am part of, this particular political party that I'm part of, something that has to do with groups of people is going to feel like a really important part of their purpose at that time. And it certainly would be. And I could see how a second stage Sagittarius could be drawn also particularly to spiritual traditions that try to downplay the ego. Let's try to destroy the ego, because they're trying to get away from that Leo side of themselves.
Right. Yep, that makes sense. And of course, that that tendency to go to the extreme with whatever group they're joining creates some
Uh-oh. Oh, no. I've turned this back on, and that's we froze up when you were in the middle of the word distortions. It definitely does cause distortions when a person's trying to go to those extreme philosophies.
Yep. So one thing that I was thinking of, that in second stage with those nodes, being in Sagittarius and having the Aquarius North Node, Leo South Node can tend, and I would imagine that this would happen over time as one stayed in second stage. I wonder what you think, Taina, but Leo South Node can really create like a kind of judgment and criticism of others and their ideas.
Oh, most definitely, for sure.
Right?
Yeah. Because Sagittarius ironically gets that way as they progress through second stage.
Yes.
And even in terms of, not all of them do, I must say, but there's a lot of them do. And there's a tendency, because of Sagittarians attracting a critical mate, and unfortunately Sagittarians can very easily attract abusive mates because the pattern just snowballs over time. And when they've been criticized so much themselves and attacked so much themselves, there's that tendency to turn around and then unleash it on others. Mm. And again, they don't all do that, but there is a certain type of late second stage Sagittarius that can be really like that. Do that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, have that whole defensive thing. And then with the South Node in Leo, it's like, well, I'm lording it over it because I've been studying all this stuff much longer than you. And I know the truth. And I'm going to tell you how you have to be, and you're not good enough. And it's that whole, because I felt so bad about myself, now I'm going to make you feel bad about yourself. And that's going to make me better. I'm going to feel better because you're the one feeling bad. You take my pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking that way that I've learned, that whatever system that I've learned is the only way to do things, right? And every other way is is inferior. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And then, again, the more the person falls down that path of digger, the pit they dig themselves. And everybody going through second stage is really slowly digging down into a pit in every sign. And by the time you get to the very end of second stage, you're deep enough in a pit that you'll just do anything to get out. And so there's almost that the Aquarius North Node then becomes a huge doorway into second, third stage, which is, I don't want to carry this burden alone anymore. And I think you froze up again. So we were talking about the second, third stage for Sagittarius and how the Aquarius North Node becomes a real beacon to pull the person more into third stage. So the ideal of, and knowing that you've got support and friends and that you can do this as part of a community, do this exploring of who you really are, leaving everything behind, and it can really, I think it could be a real valuable tool for somebody in second, third stage, because it can accelerate all the self-esteem issues, help the person go back to this ability to be yourself again, like you did in first stage. I think possibly more than any other node combination for Sagittarius, because of the Aquarius piece of just really enjoying and being spontaneous and in a community environment. Be yourself with your friends. And not have to carry all the burden of having to be the leader and look after everybody and have to have the answer. And you're worthless if you aren't in that position of importance because of one specific type of knowledge that's the do or die knowledge. You don't have to be a Leo that has to try to rescue everybody.
Absolutely. I see Aquarius North Node as like when they really step into it, there's such a liberation and there's just this liberated joy because, Aquarius North Node is really about like valuing each individual person and seeing the beauty in each person that you're, interacting with, creating win-win situations. And like being one of many. And that can just feel like, I've just seen people, even, they live their whole life in their Leo South Node, and they finally in older age get into their Aquarius North Node, and they're just like, I can just be one of the many. Like, it's like a king, like, walking away from their throne. And there's that huge, detachment that's it can be so emotionally wrought because they think they're going to lose this huge thing that defines them.
Which is letting go of rigid ideologies too, that for the Sagittarius with this
totally
rigid ideologies have to be here or I'm not worthy anymore, and everyone has to follow it, and I'm isolated and trying to get everybody to do things the right way. And I think when the no matter what the sign is, when the Aquarius North Node person gets down off the throne, everybody just embraces them and says, well, we loved you always anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't have to be so detached up there on the throne.
Yes. Yeah. It's a beautiful liberation for them. And they can finally just have joy and trust life again.
Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great combination.
It is a great combination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good choice.
Yes. Keep going, Alicia. And everybody else who has it.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah, so once we get into third stage Sagittarius, that's when in the third stage we tend to marry the nodes. So we tend to bring the positive piece of the south node and the positive piece of the north node, and we bring them together.
Mm.
So this is the person who has all kinds of, valuable resources, valuable philosophical or spiritual or practical resources that can really help make people's lives better. That's the third stage Sagittarian. They're able to remember and draw upon different philosophies that they've developed in previous lifetimes in a non-dogmatic way and in a very individualized way for each person who comes to them.
Yeah.
And their Leo and Aquarius knows exactly when to really give a directing, guiding hand, which is the Leo leadership piece.
Yeah.
And give somebody that kind of security of, well, here's a piece of truth that's going to be your rock and your foundation, and I'll be your mentor in this process, and then I'll set you free. Versus they know when to let's all just keep exploring this and growing this together.
Yes.
And they certainly benefit from, any kind of networking or interacting with groups of people. That's just allowing them to keep growing and expanding and sharing all the knowledge that they've gained.
Absolutely. Yeah. Third stage Sagittarius, I've just noticed such a beautiful quality of like being able to harness and make use of, the wisdom that they learned from different traditions.
Yes, absolutely.
And at the same time, there's such a detachment and almost like a oil and water effect with dogma.
Yes. Oh, yes, totally.
Right? That it's just like, that just rolls off. That just rolls off. And there's
description, yes.
there's a real freedom within that too. So I'm feeling a lot of liberation in this combination in the third stage.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. And it's a liberation that's very joyfully shared with others too. It's so nice.
Yeah. Beautiful. Is there anything else?
One of the things that we had the request to talk about the house position that our person who requested the video has. And yeah, I mean, it might have been nice. We did consider in the beginning when we first started making these if we should talk about each of the houses that the nodes could be in, but it just becomes so massive. There's 144 combinations of suns and nodes, so I don't know if it's too big an undertaking, but certainly to just look at this particular combination. So if you, the viewer, happen to have the same thing as Alicia, then you sort of hit a little mini jackpot here. But she has the north node in the 8th house and the south node in the 2nd house. So that to me is there's a similarity, I think, between Leo south node and the 2nd house itself, because both of them are more. They're more isolated. It's kind of more contracted and simplified. Because again, it's about how that Leo south node says, well, I have the only truth and you have to follow me and I have to do this on my own. And the 2nd house says, this is concrete reality. And if I don't hang on to this position of rulership or this position of importance and responsibility, maybe I'm not going to get my needs met in life. And these are concretized values that I've had. And they're very solid, so people should follow it. But then it feels lonely and it feels isolating, and there's this sense of something. It feels very cold to sit in that south node place with that Leo in the 2nd house. And then Aquarius in the 8th, massively powerful, incredibly expansive. Because the thing about the 8th house, one of the key phrases that I use with the 8th house is the phrase "I care."
I care.
Because the 8th house is that amazing house where all the first 7 houses are really all about me, myself, my first house. My 2nd house is my money and my values. My 3rd house is my environment, my friends and my siblings. The 4th house is my home. The 5th house is my children and my lovers, my self-expression. The 6th house is my health, my pets, my servants. The 7th house is my mate, my public, my enemies. But the 8th house that's suddenly where we're merging with everything else. That's suddenly where we're stepping beyond just the self. The eighth house is a house of ecology, because it's a house where of our collective resources.
Mm.
And so as the person goes towards third stage Sagittarius and already has all these internal resources, here they or she can share these incredible resources on a massive scale in a happy, joyful way with many, many, many people, and not feel like, well, I have to establish and substantiate my value in one specific rigid position
Yes,
of leadership I'm supposed to take on, the Leo South Node in the second house.
absolutely. The Aquarius North Node is really about stepping into a lifetime of uh, being of service to humanity.
Absolutely. Yes.
And the eighth house is the house of our responsibility to
Yes.
those that we find ourselves around, right?
Exactly.
That we have exchanges with. Um, so that combination is
Yeah.
like, I see it as taking all the wisdom from second stage, if they've
Yes.
been through second stage, right? And then using that, now that becomes compost, that becomes what I
Exactly.
give of
Yeah.
service to humanity. And that is my responsibility, and living with not a burdensome sense of
No.
responsibility.
No, almost a spontaneous, it multiplies all by itself kind of situation, where
Mm,
suddenly it's like a certain type of spiritual principle. If you give in the right way, you can give infinitely, because
yes,
everything you give replenishes itself and keeps
yes,
growing.
yes.
There is that element to it. And then on a rough day, a person temporarily slide back to that Leo in the second house, which says, I I have to make sure I prove my value, because the second house can be about substantiating your value. And it has to be a particular goal I have to have achieved. It's almost like, for a moment, that little hiccup into certain traditional values that get imposed from the outside,
Mhm.
because it's society saying I'm not good enough, or the people saying in the other
Yes.
lifetimes I'm not good enough. And of course, the more we go towards the North Node, the more the South Node will kind of get quieter and quieter and fade away, and have less and less outbursts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The North Node is really the remedy for those kind of nagging patterns of the South Node. And
Yes.
when we do it well, I mean, it is important, it seems, and this wouldn't be a danger for someone already in third stage.
Yes.
But for someone in second, third, it could really be a danger, and in second, to go toward the North Node in almost an obsessive way,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
To the point where we kind of like lose the balance in the other direction.
Yes, exactly.
um, right, that the Vedic astrologers will talk about it as the head that doesn't have a body. It's like
Yeah.
you're so hungry that you kind of get lost in the greed.
Yeah.
um, but you know when you're doing it in balance, when you're going toward your North Node, there's this sweet spot where it's like suddenly all those problems that have dogged one, and they just keep, those patterns that you keep falling into, they just are not, they're not, those traps are not there
Irrelevant.
anymore.
Yeah.
They're irrelevant, exactly.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, which is such a relief, because then we don't have to focus on what not to do. We can focus on what to go toward.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like until the South Node remnants are let go of enough, the person could view that North Node opportunity as a huge responsibility that you might not be equal to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have I become
Yeah.
strong enough in myself? Have I become
Yes.
established enough in myself to go do that big miraculous thing? Because this is a kind of a miraculous nodal combination, having
Mm,
these particular signs in these houses. Put
mm,
Aquarius North Node in the eighth house, because they're both such expansive indicators.
yeah.
It could look like, how am I going to do that all by myself? Well, the answer is, it's never done all by yourself. It's always done through you. So just
Yeah.
let go and let the ride carry you, which takes you right back to the positive gifts of first stage again,
Yeah.
and manifest fully in third. Since it really is an indicator of this person's planning to go to third, I would think, this
I
particular
would think so.
combination.
That really makes sense to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Very nice.